In September 1987, 50-year-old Dale Kerstetter vanished from his job during an overnight shift at the Corning Glassworks plant in Bradford, Pennsylvania. On that very same night, more than $250,000 worth of platinum disappeared from the facility. And yes, if you're a longtime viewer, you know that I have a keen interest in both heists and missing persons cases, so I couldn't pass this one up. Kerstetter was a veteran maintenance man and security guard with 27 years' experience at the Corning plant. He was scheduled to work his usual night shift on Saturday, September 12, 1987. By the next morning, he was gone without a trace, leaving behind personal belongings and a mystery that endures to this day. Investigators and family alike have grappled with the question: was Dale Kerstetter an unsuspecting victim of a robbery, or a willing participant in an elaborate theft? Dale was a trusted employee described as an ordinary, well-liked man devoted to his large family. Sometime during the night, approximately $250,000 worth of platinum pipe used in the glass manufacturing process went missing from the plant's furnace area, along with Kerstetter himself. When the next security guard, John Lindquist, showed up at 7 a.m. on Sunday to relieve Dale, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Kerstetter was nowhere to be found at his post. In the plant's cafeteria, Lindquist discovered Dale's lunch pail sitting on a table alongside his newspaper and keys. This was an alarming sign, as it appeared Dale had left in the middle of his shift without even consuming the dinner he brought. Later that morning, security staff located Kerstetter's pickup truck, still in the plant parking lot, yielding more puzzling clues. The truck's keys were still in the ignition, and inside the vehicle, investigators found a full carton of cigarettes, Dale's food, and an empty holster for his weapon, which itself was missing. There were no indications of forced entry at the plant, or signs of a struggle at the scene. These early clues suggested that whatever happened, it occurred suddenly, and likely not at Kerstetter's own initiative. For example, Dale was a heavy smoker, so leaving behind an entire carton of cigarettes was highly unusual if he had intended to leave voluntarily. Plant procedures also called for the lone night guard to check in by phone with the company's headquarters every hour. However, it was later discovered that Dale never made any hourly check-in calls after starting his shift. Unfortunately, a new employee in the remote monitoring office wasn't familiar with this protocol, so Kerstetter's missed check-ins went unnoticed in real time. Once Kerstetter's disappearance was recognized, plant officials and authorities quickly launched a search of the sprawling facility and surrounding area. And when I say sprawling here, I'm not exaggerating. The facility itself is over 100,000 square feet, and the property it's on is even larger. Fearing that the missing guard might have been injured or fallen ill on the job, a K-9 unit was brought in to track his scent through the building. The bloodhounds traced Dale's trail along his normal patrol route at first, then led officers to the second-floor area housing the plant's glass furnace, where the valuable platinum was kept. This location wasn't part of Kerstetter's usual rounds, raising a red flag that something drew him there during the night. Upon inspecting the furnace, managers discovered that several pieces of platinum lining had been cut out and removed, confirming that a major theft had occurred. Despite an extensive search of the building, no sign of Kerstetter was found inside, and a sweep of the surrounding woods and a nearby creek also turned up nothing. By later that day, the McKean County Sheriff's Office and Pennsylvania State Police were treating the incident as both a missing person case and a high-value burglary. A breakthrough in the early investigation came when officials reviewed the plant's security camera footage. About 4 days after the incident, Corning personnel manager Patrick Foley scrutinized recordings from 3 surveillance cameras that monitored the facility. Also, keep Foley's name in mind for later, because he's going to come up again in a bit, and depending on how you see this case, you'll either love or hate him. What Foley saw was startling and completely changed the nature of the case and the investigation. At approximately 10:40 p.m., only minutes after Kerstetter started his shift, the footage showed a masked intruder walking through the back area of the plant. At around 10:45 p.m., the cameras captured a brief encounter between Dale and this masked person in a corridor. Kerstetter could be seen walking up to the intruder and apparently engaging in a short conversation. The two then moved together out of frame. Moments later, the intruder is seen walking through the plant alone, without Kerstetter. The next significant footage comes around midnight, when the intruder appears on camera in the furnace area on the second floor, precisely where the platinum was stored. The video shows the intruder in that area, and later shows him wheeling out a large, heavy bag through the building. Investigators speculated that the bag likely contained the stolen platinum, or possibly even Kerstetter himself. Notably, during the brief corridor encounter on the tape, as Kerstetter and the masked man were leaving the second floor area together, Dale glances up directly into one of the security cameras. This peculiar moment would become a focal point of debate. Was Dale subtly looking into the camera to signal for help, or was he acknowledging the camera Jim from The Office style, because he knew what was about to happen? Authorities at the time couldn't determine if Kerstetter's behavior indicated duress or complicity. The surveillance evidence made one thing clear: the unidentified intruder was able to navigate the plant with confidence. The individual knew exactly where to find the platinum, how to access the furnace, even in the dark, and where equipment like carts or bags were located. This strongly suggested that someone familiar with the facility, perhaps a current or former employee, was involved in the heist. Notably, while the authorities have been uncertain about whether Dale was involved, the company he worked for 27 years of his life literally immediately threw him under the bus. Patrick Foley, the plant manager I mentioned previously, went on the record saying that Dale was a common thief taking their platinum. Also, as a complete aside, I hope Mr. Foley's words inspire someone to take this as a sign to follow their own dreams. By way of reminder, Dale gave 27 years of service to Corning Glassworks. Yet this was the thanks he got at the end of the day, where there was a significant likelihood that he was slain in the line of duty. Dale's family vehemently rejected the notion that Dale was a platinum thief from the beginning. Family members described Kerstetter as a devoted father of 6, who would never willingly abandon his children and grandchildren without any word. In the months and years following the disappearance, the case remained a stubborn mystery. Law enforcement conducted numerous interviews and background checks. It came to light that Kerstetter had been under financial strain. He'd recently taken a pay cut of several $1,000s and was reportedly $40,000 behind on various loan and bill payments. This information gave weight to a possible motive if he had engineered the theft. Investigators also noted that no trace of the missing platinum or Dale himself surfaced in the aftermath. The platinum, a highly valuable commodity, could have been melted down or sold on a black market, making it hard to trace. Meanwhile, despite occasional tips, police never identified the masked culprit seen on the tape. The uncertainty of Kerstetter's fate created legal and personal dilemmas for his family. In 1990, 3 years after he vanished, Dale's daughter Wendy petitioned the court to have her father declared legally dead. She was hoping to bring some closure and possibly claim life insurance and his pension benefits. Corning Glassworks fought this petition, contending that Dale could still be alive and may have been a participant in the crime. During the hearing, the company's lawyer argued there was no conclusive evidence that Kerstetter had met with foul play. The Pennsylvania Superior Court agreed that the evidence of Dale's demise was too vague and denied the petition in December 1990. As a result, Kerstetter remained legally a missing person, and Corning withheld his pension and insurance payouts from his family. Over the years, several theories have emerged to explain what might have happened to Dale Kerstetter. The core question is whether Kerstetter was an unwilling victim of foul play, or whether he was a willing participant in the theft who disappeared by choice. Within these broad possibilities are variations, including the idea that he could have been involved in the crime, but ultimately double-crossed and harmed by accomplices. Each theory has its own evidence and arguments, with strengths and weaknesses supported by the known facts. One prominent theory is that Dale Kerstetter was the victim of foul play, meaning he encountered intruders during a robbery and was forcibly taken and slain. In this scenario, criminals, possibly one or more people, broke into the plant to steal the platinum and neutralize the security guard as an obstacle. Supporting evidence for this theory centers on indications that Kerstetter didn't leave on his own terms. The scene left behind at the plant strongly suggests an abrupt interruption. Investigators found no signs of a struggle at the guard station, but it's possible that the confrontation was quick, explaining the lack of obvious violence on the premises. After all, the thieves would have had strong motivation to be as silent as possible. The fact that his weapon was missing from its holster implies he might have armed himself when facing a threat, or that the intruder took his weapon from him. On the security tape, Kerstetter's behavior could be interpreted as that of a man under duress. The other main line of speculation is that Kerstetter was involved in the crime. In this view, the incident was an inside job, and the masked intruder could have been an accomplice or co-conspirator rather than an unknown assailant. Proponents of this theory emphasize Kerstetter's possible motive and the inside knowledge required to carry out the theft. Investigators uncovered that Dale was under significant financial pressure, including tens of thousands of dollars in debt and a recent pay cut at work. Some have suggested that this pay cut after 27 years, alongside his mounting debt, could have forced a good, loyal worker to turn bad. While the inside job theory is plausible, there are significant challenges and counter-arguments that cast doubt on Kerstetter's willing complicity. The most major point is Dale's abrupt and total disappearance. Even if he initially escaped, can we believe that for decades he never contacted any of his loved ones or resurfaced? However, supporters of the theory that he was in on it speculate that Dale was double-crossed by his co-conspirator. In assessing the competing theories, it's important to note that none of them have been proven. Simply put, this is a case with an abundance of strange evidence but little definitive proof. Personally, I have significant difficulty believing that a family man who worked for a company for 27 years would throw it all away for a platinum heist. I wasn't able to find the value of his pension in my research. That said, I suspect that the value of his pension after 27 years' work was likely worth more than the platinum he allegedly stole. However, to put things in perspective, the company fought tooth and nail to deny his heirs any rights to the pension, and last I checked, lawyers aren't free. This is doubly true considering he would have at least had to split it 50-50 with his accomplice, assuming there was only one. Further yet, I suspect Dale Kerstetter may not have had ready access to a fence, given that he clearly wasn't living a life of crime. He would have had to have taken a massive hit on the exchange of the illicit platinum. In my view, the numbers just don't really add up, and I'd like to propose a theory I haven't run into so far. Dale was known to be the only person who worked security at the plant where the platinum was kept. It would have been extremely easy for a perpetrator to follow him back to his house, snap a few pictures, and then confront him at a different location. At this point, he would have been given an offer he couldn't refuse, and we know from his family that he was a loving family man with 6 kids, plus grandkids. I think he could have been forced to do the whole thing, and that last look at the security camera was a knowing goodbye. I admit this is purely speculation, but in my view it fits better with the evidence than him willingly throwing away significant pension-based wealth for this heist. Anyway, I've gone on way too long about Dale Kerstetter's case, but I find his case endlessly fascinating. Let me know what theory you prefer in the comments or propose your own. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a reminder to hit that notification bell and share this video with 2 people you know. Sharing my videos helps my channel grow in a big way, and the best part is it's totally free and only takes a second. In November 1980, 26-year-old Valerie McDonald, an aspiring actress and part-time model, vanished from San Francisco under mysterious circumstances. She was last seen on November 9, 1980, leaving her North Beach apartment with a young man who had promised her a bit part in a movie. On the day she disappeared, Valerie was in the process of moving out of her apartment and had been wary of the new building managers, who were ex-convicts. That afternoon, one of them, Michael John Hennessy, convinced her to accompany him by offering $200 for a small role in a supposed Dustin Hoffman film being shot that night. Friends grew concerned when Valerie didn't return and contacted police the next day. However, they were initially told they had to wait 72 hours to file a missing persons report. Valerie's friends spent days searching for her and eventually reached out to Valerie's parents. The parents flew to San Francisco, only to be brushed off by authorities who speculated that their daughter might have gone to Las Vegas. It wasn't until roughly a week after Valerie's disappearance that police truly began investigating, and by then, critical time had been lost. Once the San Francisco police delved into the case, suspicion quickly focused on the men running Valerie's building. These were Michael Hennessy and his 2 associates, John Abbott and Philip Thompson. Investigators learned these 3 had taken over management of the apartment that fall, and all were recently out of prison. On November 19, 1980, about 10 days after Valerie went missing, authorities went to question the trio, only to discover they had abruptly vanished. A break in the case came a week later in Canada. On November 26, 1980, Abbott and Hennessy resurfaced in British Columbia, where they were confronted by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. During this encounter, Hennessy was eliminated by the police, while Abbott was captured after attempting to shoot 2 Mounties. In Abbott's vehicle and belongings, officers found multiple weapons and personal items of Valerie's, including her ID cards and the leather jacket she had been wearing on November 9th. These chilling discoveries confirmed that Valerie had been in the men's company and strongly suggested foul play. Authorities also learned that Philip Thompson had been with Abbott and Hennessy in Canada, but had flown back to California shortly before the shootout. Despite the evidence linking the suspects to Valerie's disappearance, there was still no trace of Valerie herself. Without a body, a weapon, or any direct evidence of foul play, San Francisco police felt they lacked enough proof to charge Abbott or Thompson at the time. Abbott was instead prosecuted in Canada for the attempted shooting of the officers and sentenced to prison there. Thompson was later arrested in California in 1983 on unrelated kidnapping and robbery charges. Despite tantalizing circumstantial evidence, Valerie's case unfortunately went cold. Philip Thompson and John Abbott denied any involvement in Valerie's disappearance, and with one suspect dead and the others behind bars on other matters, leads grew cold. A major break finally came over a decade later. In October 1991, hunters in a remote area of Ferry County, Washington, not far from the Canada-US border, stumbled upon partial skeletal remains near the Kettle River. The remains were initially recorded as an unidentified Jane Doe. At the time, forensic examiners could only determine that they belonged to a woman in her mid-20s to 30s. Finally, in late 2000, a review of dental records in California's missing persons database yielded a hit. In November 2001, authorities announced that the remains were identified as Valerie McDonald. The authorities officially determined that she had been rendered deceased non-consensually, confirming what her family and investigators had long suspected. The location of the grim find, along a river in Washington state, strongly tied her death to the suspect's flight path toward Canada. This discovery, 2 decades after Valerie vanished, provided some closure to her family, even as the question of who was responsible remained unanswered. Despite the strong circumstantial case against the trio, no one has ever been charged or prosecuted in this case. By the time Valerie's remains were identified in 2001, one suspect, Hennessy, was long dead, and another, Thompson, was incarcerated for life on a different slaying. The third, John Abbott, was living overseas and out of reach. After he was released from Canadian prison for his role in the shootout, he was deported to the United Kingdom, his home country. From there, he's lived in Japan, New Zealand, and South Africa. He's never faced any charges whatsoever in relation to Valerie's case, and some theories online suggest that his dad is a politically powerful individual and pulled some strings. That said, I was only able to find this information in forum gossip, so I'd take that all with a grain of salt for the time being. In December 1993, Waterloo, Iowa was rocked by two brutal slayings that continue to confound investigators and haunt the local community. Two elderly residents, 83-year-old Gladys Held and 87-year-old Jacob Barretts, were found dead in their own apartments on consecutive nights. These cases, marked by striking similarities in method and timing, have led many to suspect a single, elusive criminal may be responsible. Despite extensive investigations and modern forensic advances, the truth behind these acts remains a mystery. On the night of December 8, 1993, Gladys Held, a retired secretary, was attacked in her apartment at the Walnut Court Retirement Community at 315 Walnut Street. The following morning, when a concerned resident discovered that Gladys had missed her daily in-house service, alarm bells were raised. Initially, staff suspected that she may have had a medical emergency in the night. Responding officers found her lying in bed in disarray, with belongings scattered around the room. Evidence indicated that Gladys had been struck with her telephone and then strangled to death. Investigators later noted that Gladys's door was left unlocked and that a broken glass panel on an exterior door hinted at forced entry. A neighbor had even reported an unknown man entering an apartment the previous night and demanding money before retreating when refused. Although nothing of significant value appeared to have been stolen, the signs pointed to a burglary that escalated into a horrific act. The shocking nature of the crime left residents of Walnut Court fearful for their own safety, prompting the building's management to hire private security and urge tenants to remain vigilant. Less than 24 hours after the slaying of Gladys Held, another tragedy struck only a few blocks away. Jacob Barretts, affectionately known as Old Jake by locals, was found dead in his apartment at 311 Lafayette Street on the morning of December 10, 1993. Barretts, a retired auto mechanic who lived a quiet and solitary life, had already experienced a violent incident 2 weeks earlier during Thanksgiving weekend. In that previous home invasion, his apartment door was kicked in, and an assailant, described as a man dressed entirely in black, pepper sprayed and brutally beat him before stealing cash. Adding to the eerie connection between this act and the later slayings, part of this brutal assault included an attempt to strangle Jake. Jake advised the authorities that he had recently gotten into a dispute with a cab driver over what he believed to be unfair charges on a trip back to his apartment from a bar. Although Jake survived that attack, the scars of the assault were a painful reminder of the dangers he faced. On the night of December 9th, a neighbor noticed unusual activity near Barretts' apartment, reportedly observing a man wandering the complex and hearing a disturbance later that evening. When this neighbor and the landlady checked on Jake the next morning, they found him on his couch with his arms neatly crossed over his chest. The autopsy later determined that he had died from asphyxia caused by suffocation, likely the result of being smothered with a pillow. Unlike the extremely violent struggle in Held's apartment, Baretz's scene appeared controlled, almost as though the perpetrator had taken time to stage the scene. Given that Jake had already been targeted in a robbery, many began to wonder if the same criminal had returned to finish the job. The close timing and geographical proximity of these two slayings immediately raised suspicions that they might be the work of a single perpetrator. The two apartment buildings are situated only a few blocks apart, and both crimes occurred during the night. Although the exact details of each crime differ slightly, the overall pattern indicates that the perp might have been targeting vulnerable elderly residents, possibly with the intent to commit robbery. Police eventually began to treat the crimes as connected, and by 2005, officials were openly stating their belief that one man was behind both crimes. From the outset, the investigations into these slayings faced significant obstacles. Both cases yielded very few leads, and despite an intensive police effort, no eyewitnesses came forward with any definitive information. Forensic teams collected blood samples, hair fibers, and trace evidence from both scenes. Yet, no usable fingerprints were found, suggesting that the perp may have taken precautions, such as wearing gloves. Although DNA profiling was still emerging as an investigative tool at the time, the samples collected from both crime scenes have yet to match any known offender in the state database. And one question I had, and I'm sure you do too, is whether these two DNA samples match with one another. Well, I hate to break it to you, but the answer isn't readily available. That said, reading between the lines, you'll recall that in 2005 the cops said, "They think it was the same guy. I think that's confirmation that the DNA from the scenes matches." All that said, the lack of a DNA match to a database continues to be one of the major stumbling blocks in solving these cases. The limited physical evidence was compounded by the absence of clear eyewitness testimony. In the case of Gladys Held, aside from a neighbor's report of a suspicious intruder demanding money, no one witnessed the crime. Similarly, although a neighbor reported hearing disturbances at Jacob Baretz's apartment, by the time anyone arrived, the assailant had already vanished into the night. In January 1994, Gladys Held's son even offered a reward for information that could lead to an arrest, but this too failed to produce any tangible leads. As a result, police were left with only circumstantial evidence to pursue, and despite periodic reviews by cold case units in later years, the perpetrator has never been identified. The scarcity of definitive evidence has given rise to numerous speculative theories about who might be behind these acts. One of the most popular ideas is that a single criminal was targeting elderly residents in Waterloo. Proponents of this theory point to the vulnerability of the victims and the methodical nature of the crimes as evidence that the assailant was experienced and calculated in his approach. According to this view, the perpetrator deliberately chose seniors who lived alone, making them easy targets for a burglary that quickly escalated. Another theory that has received significant attention centers on the individual implicated in Jacob Baretz's earlier robbery. Baretz had expressed suspicion that a particular cab driver was responsible for his brutal assault during Thanksgiving weekend. Although this taxi driver theory is intriguing, law enforcement has never publicly confirmed a strong link between him and either crime. Beyond the main theories, alternative ideas have circulated among amateur sleuths. Some speculate that the acts were not solely crimes of opportunity, but part of a broader plan to instill fear in the community. A few online theorists have suggested that the perpetrator might have been emboldened by what he perceived as lax security measures in senior housing. These theorists suggest this enabled him to target vulnerable residents with minimal risk of detection. Although there's little evidence to support a personal vendetta or a message-driven motive, this possibility adds yet another layer of complexity to these cases. Personally, I think the best chance for resolution of these cases is through genetic genealogy. The perpetrator's DNA has been cataloged, and these days, even if he isn't in a database, so long as one of his relatives wants to know what percentage Irish they are, he'll be caught.